They say that the only thing constant is change. And in these times of uncertainty, how do you navigate that change and find your own version of success? I'm here today to talk with Karen Manja. She is the author of Success with Less, Working from Home, Listen Up, and a new book called Success from Anywhere. Karen, during these times of rapid change, what can you tell us about the nature of success?
I've often found that everything we think we know about our relationship with success is something we've gotten wrong. We put conditions on our relationship with success. For example, these two little tagline words. Now, you might recognize yourself in some of these. I don't know if you've ever been there. Something like, I should have a promotion by now. You know, maybe I should have a house at the beach by now, or we should all be back to the office by now. And something that I find is when we put those two words by now into our relationship with success, we set ourselves up to fail. We set ourselves up to believe that success is something that happens on a timeline. I mean, if only you would manage your calendar better, and on Tuesday from 2 to 4 each week, you would schedule this block called success. I mean, it would obviously show up then, right? And what I find is in this relationship with success, we have the healthiest relationship when we allow success to show up moment by moment. And when we get a little bit curious about the answers really to two questions. The first one is, what matters? I mean, really success for each person, and success is available to anyone, anywhere, at any time, is really about knowing the answer for yourself to that question, what matters? Well,
that's really a question of values, isn't it? I mean, and you talk about this in your book, in Success from Anywhere. You talk about how really tapping into our values is that key into finding success moment to moment. That success isn't something that's out there or that's on some timeline. It's something that's always available. So can you say more about that? I mean, how do you access those values and access those values around success?
It's critical to take a pause and think about what your values are. And I think about a very simple example. I mean, I've had jobs where I've done the same kind of work, and yet I've done that work in a different context. And in some contexts, I find that work really energizing, and in other contexts, I find that same work really exhausting, even if I work the exact same number of hours.
The same thing. Sometimes it's enjoyable, sometimes it's exhausting.
Yes.
What's the reason for the change?
Well, I stopped and thought about that and got very curious, and what I realized was when I'm in situations that are aligned with my values are showing up in my everyday life, in the work I'm doing, in how I'm spending my time and who I'm spending it with, that feels energizing because my values are present. When I'm working with people or in situations where maybe my values aren't showing up or our values are out of alignment, that's the kind of work I find exhausting. And that exhaustion sustained over time is that feeling I hear so many people describing right now, which is burnout.
Sure, that's what I was thinking. Burnout, absolutely. Well, how do you access those values moment to moment, especially when you're working in a context or a culture that may not always allow that kind of personal freedom? Is there still a way to access it?
Well, I think it's tempting. If you ask someone, what are your values? Sometimes you get this laundry list, right? You get one of two things. You get a completely blank stare, like, what? Or you get this laundry list, right? It's, I care about teamwork and family and well-being. And the list gets so long, I think, wow, if that all has to show up every day in your everyday life for you to feel successful and connected to your values, that's really difficult. I mean, that's a tall order. And so I recommend starting with a pause, taking a pause to just think about what are maybe 3, maximum 5 values that you really care about, that are core. That could be your well-being. That could be your social connections. That could be something religious or spiritual, whatever that looks like for you. But take a pause and just consider what those values are. And then conduct something I like to call the stress-free experiment.
Tell me more. What's the stress-free experiment? What is that?
So some very smart people at Stanford conducted a scientific experiment, and they took university students over a holiday break who had reported they were feeling very stressed out, what we might call in this day and age burnt out. And they divided the students into 2 groups. And it was a simple 10-minute exercise. So one group was asked to identify their values and just spend 10 minutes writing about how those values were showing up in their everyday life, just one time. The other group of students did that same activity for the entire balance of their break. And what they discovered is even the people who just spent 10 minutes one time reflecting on their values and writing about how those showed up in their everyday life reported much lower levels of stress and burnout and actually had higher performance. And then they found over time as they repeated the experiment, the more frequently people returned to that activity, the more frequently people wrote about values showing up in everyday life, it was exponential returns.
Wow. So it's a story about writing your way to success by accessing your values. And so the students wrote about how they saw their values, like evidence of their values. Is that what they wrote about?
Evidence of their values showing up in everyday life. Exactly. I mean, so for example, imagine I said, I care about having really positive relationships. And then I started to write about every single day, and I'm realizing I haven't seen anyone, I haven't spoken with anyone. I mean, is that relationship value showing up in my everyday life? Probably not, but what's the evidence, right? That I'm spending time there, I'm getting it reinforced, I'm getting that aspect of what matters to me nurtured in some kind of meaningful way.
What can you say to folks who are facing a great deal of uncertainty? Do I stay at home? Do I return to the office? How do you help people to navigate through that change? What can you say there?
One word. Choice. What I've discovered is during this period of time, no matter what the restrictions are as they come and go, whether that's your office, your community, whatever that looks like, choice is always on and always available. Now, choice lives in one place, and it's this present moment. So choice isn't, I'd like to have what happened 6 months ago. Choice doesn't live in the future. Choice is of all of the possible options and scenarios available right now, what choices could I create in light of that? And so working with what we have and what we can do to discover some of those choices, I think about really being able to see those choices more clearly when we can do 3 things: accept, adapt, and accelerate. And the reason I think that's so important is accepting says, I can't make this scenario exactly what I want it to be. My perfect choice might not be available right now. These circumstances might not be what I would choose per se. But I can accept that I need to be right here, right now, and work with what's available as the basis for that creation.
But let me ask you something.
Yes.
Is acceptance resignation? Does that mean that you just accept whatever comes down the pike? And I mean, can you say more about that? How do you balance between acceptance and just, because it could be, some folks might take it as giving up.
Yeah. Acceptance is not resignation.
Okay.
I think about acceptance as a mindset shift that says there are some factors beyond my control. And the more time and energy I spend trying to resist the factors that are beyond my control or make them something different, it just drains energy that I could be putting into what is available, what I can influence, what I can change.
Got it. And so what's the next step after acceptance? The next step is?
Adapt.
Okay.
Adapt. So I start to think about, what has changed. And in light of how do we adapt, also often hear people say, well, I'm not that adaptable, or maybe we need to launch a training program, right? So we can all learn how to be more adaptable. And while it's true, we can always engage other people that help us see ways to adapt and see choices we might not see ourselves. The good news is adaptability is hardwired into our DNA. As human beings, we are designed to adapt to different temperatures outside and to different circumstances and contexts. And the beautiful part is we can all tap into that adaptability when we start to focus on what's possible, when we move past that acceptance stage.
Fantastic. Well, and that's a big theme in your book, Success from Anywhere, is that theme of discovery and adaptability. And you even you share some ideas from David Eagleman, the author of Live Wired, who we both admire very much.
Hybrid work. Employees want it, employers need it, and everyone has questions. When done right, facilitating flexible work can be a win-win for everyone. Happier employees, engaged teams, and better business outcomes. Robin is here to make the logistics easy. Our all-in-one workplace experience platform helps thousands of companies reimagine their approach to work. To learn more about how we make hybrid work work, visit robinpowered.com.
Can you say more about what misunderstandings there are about the way that we deal with change, and more about what really is hardwired, or as the book says, live wired into our DNA?
What is really live wired is that we are designed to adapt to a changing set of circumstances. We will modify, our behaviors and our choices to look for what's optimal in any given moment in time. And we don't always have to consciously think about that modification or that adaptation in order for it to occur. Now, something very simple. We've all, sprained an ankle or twisted a knee, and what happens? What do? You feel that pain, and what do? Well, you start to adapt perhaps how you're sitting or you're walking. Now, obviously, you may not want that adaptation to be permanent, but you didn't sit and think to yourself, my knee is hurting. I wonder if I could take my next step differently as a result, right? Something innate and inherent in you said, I need to move in a different direction. I need to move differently. And that same thing is hardwired into our thought process as well, not just into our physical beings.
See, that's one of the things that I love about the book, is that it reinforces not something that it's not a matter of belief, it's a matter of observation that we can see. And in fact, it's scientifically presented from the quotes that you share by David Eagleman, the neuroscientist from Stanford. I mean, there's an ability to adapt that we don't always recognize. And sometimes if we can access that adaptability and recognize it in ourselves, I think that points towards your third step, which is the accelerate part of it. Can you say more about what you learned about acceleration and how you shared that concept in the book?
Well, one of the most fascinating studies, I think, in momentum and movement is race car driving. And I have a friend who is a race car driver, and I share some exclusive stories about, the myths of momentum and how movement really happens. But one thing that I have learned from James Hinchcliffe, who is, driven in the Indianapolis 500 and then adapted himself after a near-death experience to even dance on Dancing with the Stars. I mean, this is adaptability at its finest, right? But, in our conversation, something that I learned from him that was so critical, which is, he had to accept that he was in an accident that nearly killed him.
Right.
And that his movement was constrained and he couldn't walk. And so he thought to himself, challenge accepted. Challenge accepted. And it started there. And what he really got purposeful about and thought about is, first of all, the only response to a setback is a comeback, right? When things don't go your way, how do you move forward? How do you step into that set of choices that are available? You have to go another way. And it doesn't have to be my way, but you can go your own way. If you go your own way. But
this feels like a Fleetwood Mac album.
It could be a greatest hits of any number of albums. But the other piece about acceleration is sometimes we think that we have to go as fast as we can go.
Right.
And one of his strategies to win in a race is you don't have to put your body and that machine that you're operating full out at top speed to accelerate. Accelerating is relative. If you're trying to move forward, it's only relative to what's around you and your starting point. It's about moving forward, and it doesn't have to be this all-out, full-on, cram the gas pedal to the floor and go at that speed at all times. It's what can you move toward in your mindset, in your choices, and then your momentum that gives you the boost you need to keep going forward.
Got it. So it's not about pushing yourself to the absolute limit. It's relative to where you are and finding acceleration from there. One of the things that Hinchcliffe says in the book, and you do a great job of talking about this, is he talks about the importance of being in neutral. What is it that we miss about the acceleration that we can find when we're actually in neutral? I mean, that's kind of counterintuitive. What did he share with you there?
What fascinates me about professional athletes, especially someone like a race car driver, is you need to make life or death decisions while your adrenaline is pumping.
Right.
I mean, if you are driving a car 235 miles an hour, even if your only job is to make 4 left turns, you still have to make some split-second decisions. And how do you do that from a place of great decision making? And certainly there's training that happens, but one of the most revealing things that James Hinchcliffe shared with me is he actually works with a mindset coach. He spends time literally training his brain to say, no matter what is happening around me and how fast that circumstance might be changing, what can I see in this moment that is the smallest choice or adjustment I can make that's optimal for the context in which I'm operating?
So like a micro adjustment.
A micro adjustment. And I think about this, what would happen if we adapted that concept into the organizations and teams where we work, or even with our own professional goals, and we took that think big, act small mentality, and we started to operate from that neutral place that said, if I want to get to a big outcome, and that could be winning a race or getting a promotion or losing 100 pounds, whatever that looks like for you, how could I operate from a place of neutral that says, what's a micro adjustment I can make? I think about it as something I call the 5-minute fix.
Okay, tell us about the 5-minute fix. The
5-minute fix says this. Imagine that I thought to myself, my overall goal is I want to be healthy. I want to feel great. Okay. And I'm someone who's been working from home, and I'm in this dining room chair, and wow, my back is hurting. It's probably not ideal, right?
Can we get her another chair, please?
Another chair, please. Yes. Aren't there people for this somewhere? I know. Shouldn't you be doing something?
But if you're working,
imagine you're working. Let's just take this example, right? And you decided what you really wanted to do is not have that back pain. So how are you going to find the time? I mean, you're already so busy. Your calendar's so full. So I think about it this way. Take 5. In this 5-minute fix, the first day you're going to spend 5 minutes looking at chairs. Next day you're going to select one. Next day, take 5 minutes and order one. When the box arrives, take 5 minutes and bring it inside from wherever you live. 5 minutes, take it out of the box the next day. 5 minutes at a time, eventually you're going to get that chair put together. It's going to be in your office. The pain's going to go away. You had a big goal. You did it in small increments. Now, as I visited with thousands of people since working from home came out, and I talked about the power of routines, rituals, and boundaries, and sort of came to this 5-minute fix, I discovered 5 minutes is powerful for a couple of reasons. One, it's the appetizer of time management. I mean, you can take a bite out of 5 minutes out of your calendar from so many different places, and you might be willing to try. 5 minutes, you create momentum. I mean, you feel kind of good. You made 5 minutes of progress. You got 5 minutes more. It's easy to move it along. The other piece, too, is you never get so far in that you feel like you can't make an adjustment. And I've heard people getting remarkable results, literally losing hundreds of pounds, making life changes, getting to big goals and changes with customer relationships, moving businesses in new directions. But 5 minutes at a time. Think big, act small.
Think big, act small. You've done some big things during the pandemic and post-pandemic. I mean, you wrote 2 books during the pandemic. Now this new one, Success from Anywhere, is coming out. You're a vice president at Salesforce. You're speaking all over the world. You're influencing companies and leaders in so many ways. And I'm just curious, what shows up for you when you say think big and act small? Are you saying that what has driven your success has been your ability to do the doable and focus on these kind of micro adjustments, or has it been going after these big goals? I mean, what has it been like for you to achieve so much?
Do the doable is critical. And I think about it in terms of what we were just talking about with think big, act small. And if there's something like writing a book, or developing a new training series, or maybe helping change some of the ways we connect with our customers. When I think about doing the doable, for me, it comes down to that mindset of I'm in a position and I care enough. There's enough upside here that I'm willing to make this a priority. And I feel like what happens when we have really big and worthwhile aspirations, even that we care about and may be well supported, we get in our own way with believing we can't make time for it. And so I started challenging when I have something big I want to change or to try. That could be learning a new skill. That could be writing 2 books, as you mentioned. I really look at what's on my calendar and my to-do list, and I ask 3 questions. Maybe a 4th bonus question if you're up for it.
I am. What are those 3 questions? Well, what are those 4 questions?
Yeah, I look at it this way. Does it have to be whatever's on that calendar or to-do list? Does it have to be me? Does it have to be me right now? And the bonus question that seems to be more relevant than ever, does it have to be a meeting? And what that opens up is a chance to do the doable and say, what might I be willing to take away or solve for differently? How could I create choices to solve for this differently so I can make room for what matters?
I wanted to know if you could share one of the pieces that you talked about, because you do coaching for teams and executives and aspiring leaders, and you work with people all over the world. And you shared a really interesting story about a challenge that you faced at work between 2 employees that you solved and you managed through the force of your own will. but you learned a valuable lesson. And I wonder if you could share that just from the standpoint of, because it really points to the power inside of coaching and doing the doable.
Coaching says, I'm going to guide you, give you a set of instructions, and give you the independence to go co-create. I'll give you some tips, but the point is not to be dependent on that manager. A coach of a great sports team doesn't run out onto the field during play and pick up the ball and run the play themselves. They're whispering in the ear of the people that they're trusting to be their talent. And to me, that was the big difference, the big inflection point.
Well, that difference is so important, because you're really talking about the difference between management and coaching, management and leadership, and being able to create an atmosphere of empowerment where people take ownership. And that's what's so powerful about the trainings that you're doing and sharing with people how exactly to do that, because success is something that is accessible to all of us. It is something that we can find moment to moment when we take away the obligations and the misunderstandings that we put on ourselves. What can people expect when they read Success from Anywhere? Because I'm sure folks are curious to know, what are some of the takeaways that the book provides?
What readers can expect is, first of all, an opportunity to consider how to design and play a new kind of game by meeting a very unlikely entrepreneur who helps us see the game of life in a new way.
How do you define the game of life? Does that mean like what anyone is on about in any career anywhere, or what are you saying exactly?
Well, I think about that board game from when I was a kid. I have a brother, he's 4 years younger than me, and we loved to play games. In fact, so much so that in the summertime, we would roll out our sleeping bags and we would sleep next to the games we were playing so that we could be always on and always present with the game. And I find a lot of people lead their lives that way, particularly their professional lives. You know, you're always camping out by this game called your work life so that you can keep a watch on it at all times, you know, just to make sure you're successful. Well, we would play this board game called Life, if you remember this at all. But the way you win at the game of life is you accumulate cars, collateral, connections, and cash. Now, I mean, it's difficult to relate to that. I mean, certainly it's not how we think about winning in the game of life today, or is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, something so funny. I pulled out that original board game that I still have because I started thinking about, ultimately, how did you win? Was it just, you totaled all this up? And what's so fascinating is you have these little plastic cars, and as you make these choices to move you through the game of life, every player lands on this bright red square, and it says, the day of reckoning.
The day of reckoning.
The day of reckoning. And you tally up all those assets, and then you spin the wheel. And at the end of spinning that wheel, what happens is you either become a tycoon millionaire or bankrupt.
Wow.
And like I thought, isn't that interesting,
or.
right? You're spending a lifetime of accumulation only to arrive at a day of reckoning where some artificial arbitrary game is going to determine whether you win or lose. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because I think when we start to look at our work and we look at our life and how it fits, we're playing a very high stakes game with our health and our well-being and our relationships. And we're trying to accumulate all of these things that become more to-dos. And at the end is that winning. And so, in the book, we talk a lot, and people ask me all the time, what's the future of work? And people are usually looking in the direction of, what are the rules that we need to have in place to win at this game of work from home or work from anywhere? How many days a week should people be in the office? Like, that could be relative to your culture. And, I'll get these questions about, how do we configure the office? And here's what it really comes down to for me, going back to that game of life and how we all win. I mean, the future of work is less about how we reconfigure cubicles, and it's more about how we redesign our relationship with work and how it shows up in our lives and what we define as winning. So this book is really about how do we design and play a new game together.
And what you're saying, if I understand it right, is that this book is about helping people to find their own answers and to create their own rule book.
It's about creating your own rule book. And, I think about it in these really simple terms. It's the premise that we explore together in Success from Anywhere. And the premise for Success from Anywhere is a single question. What would happen if we could change the game of life together? And if rewriting the rules sounds exciting or daunting, for some people, rules are things that were written to be followed. So if that sounds overwhelming, the great news is throughout the course of the book, there's a series of game changer activities where I guide you through how to think about what matters to you so that we can change this game of life together, so that you can rewrite the rules on your terms so that you can always win. Because what I've discovered time and again is success is not a destination. Success is not a location. Success is available to anyone, anywhere, at any time.
And that success is yours in Success from Anywhere by Karen Manja. She is Vice President of Customer and Market Insights at Salesforce. She is the author of Working from Home, the international bestseller, Listen Up, and now her new book, Success from Anywhere, a book that provides insights into how to change the game, write your own rules, and create the future of work. My name is Chris Westfall. I've been talking with Karen Manja. Thank you so much for watching this video.